We're letting a few more people get in the door and signed in. Thank you all for coming, and we'll get started in just a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you for coming to our first of two public engagement meetings on the very exciting project called the Gettysburg Gateway Connectivity Project. Truth be told, staff did not come up with that name. A consultant did. But the reason was when you're applying for multi-million-dollar grants, they want it to sound pretty lofty. And actually, the project is lofty. It's a very audacious plan, and it is vital that we get all of your input into it. I'm going to give the high-level view, and then we'll do some introductions, and then we'll turn it over to the borough engineer, Chad Clabaugh, to talk about the 30,000-foot view. So the Baltimore Street project came to light in about 2017 when we really started grappling with the poor road conditions, sidewalk conditions along the spine of Baltimore Street. As we all know, we have a beautiful Lincoln Square, we now have a beautiful Steinway Avenue, and the no man's land in between needs a lot of work, TLC. That is ultimately where this project started. Went through several iterations, went through a master plan process, applications for funding for design and engineering, which is currently where we are. Engineer Clabaugh will talk a little bit more about that. The goal, the big goal, is to improve safety, accessibility, amenities for not only our own citizens, but for our better part of 3 million visitors every year. And then also visioning on what we want Gettysburg to be, not for us. So the big thing I'd like to get everyone's mind wrapped around is the conversations we're having tonight are not for us. They are for the next generations. What do we vision Gettysburg being 50, 75 years from now? Because that's what we're building now. So when we're talking, think about the future, not today. So with that groundwork, I am Charles Gable. I'm the Gettysburg Borough Manager. I will hand this to Ms. Sellers, who can introduce herself. And while she's doing that, we have experts, we have consultants, we have design professionals who will be interacting with us as the night progresses. This is going to be very interactive. I have deliberately set you up in 3 different tables. We're going to do this in 3 phases tonight, because there's 3 phases of the project. Each phase of that project, you will then turn to your tabletop. Each table has a moderator to get conversations going. There's pens and maps. Feel free to diddle on them, or doodle on them, come up with ideas. We're going to then take those ideas at the end of each section and talk about them broadly, and then at the very end of the night, we're going to talk as a group. And when you want to talk about that, I will moderate. I'll go around and hand you the microphone, so you'll have that opportunity. Just want to make everyone aware that we are live on community media. And so table 1 is the group that is wired for sound. So when you're having your private discussions at your tabletop exercises, you will be heard on community media. Maybe not so much on tables 2 and 3.
Excellent.
Just so you know. With that, Ms. Sellers.
Hi, Jill Sellers, president of Main Street Gettysburg. And we're just going to go around the room so you know who is joining us as far as the expertise on this team. So, Peter.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is, My name is Peter Quintanilla, and I'm from Michael Baker.
Hello, my name is Chad Clabaugh. I'm the borough engineer. I'm with C.S. Davidson.
Hello, everyone. My name is Todd Trout. I'm a traffic engineer with Michael Baker.
My name is William Pompey. I'm a landscape architect with C.S. Davidson.
Okay, that is the folks in the room tonight. So at any point, if we need something drawn on the screen for us to look at, Peter's here to do that for us. So if you have a landscape idea or a chicane idea or a traffic calming idea, Peter is here specifically to help us visualize your ideas coming out of your brain into actually something that could be potentially functionable. Other folks here from C.S. Davidson and others with Michael Baker are here as traffic experts or stormwater management experts or potable water or sewer experts. So there's a lot of infrastructure we need to also consider in our discussions, stuff that isn't sexy, but it's under the ground and vital to, to all of our survival. So that's part of this project as well. It's not just beautification, okay? Each table, each of you got 3 little pieces of paper as you came in and you were assigned a table. I'm going to ask that the table no wonder I couldn't see. I'm using your glasses.
Her name tag.
Apparently. The table moderator will help you fill these out, but we want you to fill them out. They're going to collect them and hand them to me. What this is before we have a conversation at any of the 3 phases, we'd like you to pick 3, only 3 of what you consider to be of a priority in that phase. And then the table moderator, if you collect them, I'll collect them. And as Jill discusses that phase, and then ultimately you turn to your tabletop exercises, I'll be tallying these up so that I can get an idea collectively what the room thinks are the priorities, okay? So with that, I will turn it over to Engineer Clabaugh for about 5-minute introduction, and then Jill Sellers will do phase 1, which is also called phase 2A, which is actually the south end near the visitor center.
So good evening, everyone. I think I know a lot of people in this room. I'm the engineer that started this project a decade ago. We've been talking about this for quite a while, and I see some of the same faces in the room, so thank you for showing up again and hanging in there. I joke a little bit with Deb Adamick from Main Street whenever we started this project, and I said, this is going to be at least a 10-year project. And she's like, whoa, don't say that to people because they aren't going to hang in there for that long. And I think one of the things that I want to say here, and I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because really we want to get into what Charles just said. We want to get into like your ideas here, and you don't want to hear me talk. And I have plans I'm going to roll out in front of each one of you, and we can get into the specifics then later. But really my main points here for my part of this presentation is to let you know that we've been talking about this for quite a while, and we're not near done. Those are kind of the 2 things that I want to deliver. We still have to go through a design process where we got to get in. It's probably another 2 years until we get a design. We don't have construction funding for this thing yet, those kind of things. So it's still going to be a couple of years until we get into any type of a construction. So that's just the real high level there. So some of the design goals, revitalize the parking and regional collective parking. So the parking department did a study on Baltimore Street and realized that a lot of Baltimore Street was underutilized in terms of the parking. And the idea was we can better utilize some of those locations for amenities, benches, trees, lights, those kind of things. So that's one of the things with parking. And there's obviously, I think a lot of you here to talk about the parking on the square. So we're going to really get into to dive into the details for parking on the square a little bit later. Street lighting. It's dark, right? If anybody walked down Baltimore Street at nighttime, it's dark. So the idea is to put the same street lights that you see in Steinway and other places in the borough. It's the same type of light that we want to install. Sidewalks and crosswalks. There's it's not a should, it's a shall with ADA compliance, Americans with Disabilities Act. We've got to make them all 2% slope, all of those kind of things. We have dangerous crosswalks. We had a crosswalk where a child was hit. We're going to try to improve the safety. People show up at our council meetings all the time, talk to us about how we need to improve pedestrian safety. So that is probably one of the most important goals out of this whole project. Landscaping and trees. Anytime we do a streetscape like this, we call it streetscape, is we want to make it look nice, right? There is an aesthetic component to this. Storm drainage and stormwater management. We need the water to flow somewhere. Water on Baltimore Street is not, the drainage is not good. And it all drains down to a culvert at the bottom of the hill, which is called the Weinbrenner culvert. Drains into Culp's Run. That culvert goes, if anybody's looking at Mr. G's ice cream, there's a big sycamore there. The culvert goes right beside that sycamore, and the culvert is failing. It's falling in as we speak. So we want to fix that, make sure that we don't flood Baltimore Street. Traffic calming. People that are coming into the borough on the south end of the borough, they're speeding often. And we have fatalities there. We have people crashing into buildings, literally. So we want to calm the traffic before it gets into the borough, not after it gets into the borough. Obvious safety components with that. We can't get rid of trucks, and that's going to be a question. Maybe get rid of trucks. We can't do that. There's really we've talked about that for many, many years, decades, about bypasses and those things around Gettysburg. Unfortunately, we got to deal with the trucks. So I just want to temper our enthusiasm with traffic calming. We can only do so much to still meet the requirements of PennDOT and allow the trucks to get through. So curb bump outs, anywhere where there is not parking makes a good spot for a curb bump out. It does a traffic calming thing. It provides a space for amenities like benches, trees, those kind of things. So that is one of the things that we're going to be looking at. The entrance to get to Gettysburg, right? So that does a couple of things. First of all, it showcases the borough. It showcases that you are now entering Gettysburg, but it also does the traffic calming things. Whenever you have a gateway, you now feel like you got to slow down because you're in a pedestrian area and you're no longer on a highway. Traffic signal at Lefevre and South Street. So if anybody has ever traveled through that intersection, especially when school lets out, you'll know there's got to be a traffic cop there. Otherwise, you're not getting out. You could sit there for an hour if there was no traffic cop. But every day at the end of the school, the traffic cop stops there and lets the buses through. So we are looking to put in a traffic signal at Lefevre and South Street. Barricades and security, that's obviously becoming a more and more important thing. You see it in the news all the time with terrorists running off the sidewalk and running into people. So whenever we have parades in the borough, our public work department has to put a lot of time into putting those big concrete blocks out to try to keep the parade safe. We're going to try to be putting in some more decorative barricades in certain locations, key locations, so that we can make it safe and maybe cut down some of the time that the public works department has to spend every time we have a parade. Public transit. Rabbit Transit is one of our partners with this project. They're literally adding money to the design phase, the construction phase. Rabbit Transit works through, is it York and Adams Transit Authority, I think it's at YADA is what it's officially called. But there's going to be locations all down Baltimore. I think it's around 4 or 5 locations where there's going to be not just a place for the bus to stop, but also a shelter with a little roof and a little bench. So that is an important piece of this project. So phases. There's a couple of things when we talk about phases. We're going to talk about project phases. Charles mentioned there's a phase 1, 2A, and a 2B. But whenever we talk about phases here, we're talking about the scope of the project, the phases of the design. So currently, the design is funded and it's underway. I mentioned earlier that the construction's not funded, but the design is funded. We're maybe 5 or 6 months into what we're calling the scoping field view. So we did literally walk the entire project with PennDOT. We also met with the National Park Service. Chris, I see Chris is here somewhere. Yeah, here's Chris. So I joke with Charles because it's a chicken and egg thing. We have to get National Park Service input, we have to get PennDOT input, and we want property owner input. And which do you get first, right? So as consultants, I will design whatever the borough is going to tell me to design, but we also need to make sure that we're following the rules of those other agencies. So that's where we're at right now. And we're in this kind of a chasing our tail thing where some of the things that we're going to show you tonight, PennDOT has already said no to. So we're kind of in that process of trying to figure it out and say, okay, what can we do? What can't we do? Same thing with the National Park Service and other property or other entities that we need to get approval from. So, of course, community and property owner engagement is now where we're at. This is the first of these 2 meetings. We're going to have another meeting 2 weeks from now. Very important part of this process. Next week, yes. And then once we are finished with that, then ultimately I'm going to go to council and say, okay, we met with PennDOT, we met with National Park Service, we met with the property owners. Council, I need you to give me direction on what you want me to design. Because at that point, we're still at kind of high level, right? This 2,000-foot view. Once we start getting into all of the utilities, then it starts getting expensive. And we don't want to start putting a lot of time and money into a design that people just don't want. So we're kind of going to, at the end of the day, I take my direction from council. So council's going to have that hard challenge of hearing from everything that we've given them and kind of giving us a scope that we need to design. Again, I mentioned that construction is not funded. We do have a build grant, which was a raised grant for a lot of years. We're on our fifth try. We've failed 4 times. We're on our 5th try of trying to get this $17 million construction project funded. We have a lot of partners all the way up to the federal level, and they keep telling us we've got a great application, so we're really close. So fingers crossed that we're going to have the construction funding. And then we got to go through a bidding phase, obviously, before we can go to construction. Whenever you're using public dollars, you can't just hire a contractor. You got to go through a whole bidding thing. So, and I'm going to turn it over to Joe.
So while Jill's getting set, if you will take just 30 seconds and find the third of a slip that says Phase 2B. It says Phase 2B, it's in blue, it says Gateway. If you could just pick the 3 top priorities that you see. Jill says her piece, and we turn over to you to.
So this is your, right, the one with the, and you want to check, just.
Who is Chad?
That's me, Chad. I'm coming.
Courtney Rhodes, nice to meet you.
Yep, we're looking at 2B is the south end of town near Rita's Ice.
So it's like Steinway, or is it up to?
Wendy, which one are we doing?
This one.
This one here, and we're picking 3?
This, maybe I'll go
There's a
there
map.
so they
There's a map on the screen now that the red shows 2B. That's all right. Okay, if you could finish quietly filling those out, we do want to keep to respect everyone's time tonight. So this first section is timed for 15 minutes. I will start the timer now. Jill's going to take just a couple of those minutes to talk about Phase 2B, and then we're going to turn over to your table moderators to get about 10 minutes of conversation at your tables. Okay, Jill.
Okay, so Phase 2B is the south end of Baltimore Street, like Charles said. So that's the gateway entrance that we're talking about. So here's some of the top-level items that really need to be addressed at this end of the project. So the gateway entrance that we talked about, that sense of arrival and getting to Gettysburg. Obviously, vehicle speed management, if anybody remembers the crash into the building at the curve there, and then we lost 2 buildings out of that. And then safe pedestrian crossing. So the cemetery is there, as well as Cemetery Hill across the street. There is not a proper crossing there, so you see a lot of pedestrians, making their way across that with cars coming up the hill at 40 miles an hour or better. And so obviously some safety considerations. So with that said, we have had those discussions with the National Park Service, and these are some of the photos. And the photo in the middle is a rendering that would show kind of what the sidewalks would look like, how a crosswalk could happen. Again, this isn't what is going to look like, but these are the suggestions and the ideas that we're having, so we can start to visualize. And the photo on the right is that hill that you either are leaving the borough the way you're looking now because you're looking south, but when you're coming in, you're coming up a blind hill, and you really don't know, if you've never been here before, you really don't know that you're coming at 40 or more miles an hour, that you're going to hit, a downtown pedestrian district. So these are some of your top issues that we're talking about. So I'm going to turn this over to the tables, give you as much time as possible to talk in your small groups about what priorities for 2B would be of interest to you.
And real quick, also while you're while you're talking about your priorities, if you have ideas on how to solve the challenge that you identified as a priority, that's part of the group discussion as well. Okay. If you need a question or anything, just raise your hand. One of us will come around and we'll be happy to facilitate further. Go ahead. Timer is on.
such a dangerous part, and especially when we have taps up there, we see people crossing all the time. You don't even have to be in any time of the day, they're just people are crossing, you get to read us, they're using that big parking space, they're just running across, so it really is, we really need. I really like that idea, the sidewalk there where they have it in that picture. Yeah.
So they're running across here.
They run
Or
all
anywhere.
scattered, that whole stretch along there, and people come zipping up that hill, zipping down that hill, and they're not even paying attention. And the people don't really even care. I mean, they're just like,
Yeah, so most of the people, right, like where you're pointing there, Chad, that they park in Max's parking lot right there, and they zip across randomly. Now, we are not going to be able to solve every person, able-bodied person, to do that. But right now, there's no real safe way for a person with a disability or a mother with a pushing a baby in a carriage, right? Like that. There's no good spot for it. So we need to at least have one of those locations.
And this would be a crosswalk similar to what's over by Mr. G's, I believe, which is a lighted.
That's what you can see right there. You can kind of see the little man. You
they
push
have
the
a
button,
the button that Mr.
Flashes.
G's,
lights
yeah.
flash. Yeah.
Which would make it, well, if the sidewalks were, compliant, then it would make it a
Yep.
much
Exactly.
safer for
Exactly.
ability to cross there.
Now that area. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, what's the thought of slowing down the traffic?
So they come in from this side, and that right there below your finger is a rendering of some ideas that we have been coming up with. Now, one of the things I wanted to said earlier is that PennDOT has already told us that they're probably not going to allow us to do a speed table. So in that rendering, you can kind of see a speed table. That's one of the things that Peter helped us draw a little bit. We're probably not going to be able to do a speed table. But we are going to be able to do street diets where they bump the curbs in and you kind of squeeze it, maybe have some flanking things. We got to be sensitive to the National Park Service because that's in the background there and the cemetery's in the background. But we want to have some flanking things, some lights or something like that, make it feel, and we want to start that all the way out in the township. So you're starting to have to go down to 25 mile an hour. A good couple hundred yards before you even get to this location. But then the second, if you go down for that one right there, is the actual entrance to the National Parks Cemetery. Like where Lincoln gave the Gettysburg Address, that's the entrance there. So one of the things we're looking at is can we slow people down the top of the hill to have a crosswalk there, even though the sight distance isn't great to that one. PennDOT might say no to that. And then we're back to the other crosswalk down here being the first one. Best case scenario, we can have both crosses, but they might not say that. They might say no to that. So there's a couple of ideas there on where that crosswalk's going to go, and we haven't really finalized that decision yet. But that's some of the ideas. Not necessarily. I just know that human nature is you're going to go the path of least. You know what I mean? So all of those people that are parked right there that want to go to one of these stores, see that list of names right there?
Yeah.
There are a bunch of stores right there. So people go back in there. They're not going to walk up to the cemetery to cross and then back down there. They're just going to zip right across the street. Right? So if you have one up there for where if somebody wants to go into the cemetery and have one if you wanted to go to the store, that's the best of both worlds. But I don't
Makes a
know.
lot of sense.
I don't know that PennDOT will allow that.
Will allow more than one.
Yeah, they might not allow two crosswalks like that right back to back.
Well, there's parking also on this side of the street for the cemetery.
Yes,
So we get a lot
there
of
is.
people parking in that lot.
There is some
there.
parking.
People are a lot more aware of that lot there. And I've seen people park here and make that walk, they make the walk down. Or sometimes they, actually, what you want to do is stop them, they'll jump the stone wall.
Jump the wall.
Yeah.
Witnessing it, see you call the ambulance.
Yes, so right now everyone's talking about this. Yep. And actually, if you want, I'll show you how the top three came out. That's what I'm doing right now.
There's one there already.
Yes. Right.
This is a light, yeah. But this is,
The highest ranked is sidewalks and crosswalks.
So you really like that crosswalk
I
is the
like
bottom
that.
line.
That's where I see most people trying to cross.
If you give me a minute.
Consideration of a traffic light somewhere there to aid with people crossing, also just to slow traffic down?
We haven't considered one there, no. The next where we did is down at Lefevre Street. The next one down right there is the Fever Street. That's where we were considering a traffic signal. Nobody's ever suggested that to me before. I mean, that'd be something I can certainly take back to the committee.
We might accomplish both goals of safe crossing for pedestrians and slowing traffic.
Yeah, this is really unbelievable.
Sidewalks up there, they're better, aren't they?
There's sidewalk only on one side up to a certain point. I guess that's.
Yes, the sidewalk stops right there, and even the new sidewalk that the National Park Service built on the other side isn't technically ADA compliant. It's already. The way we build brick sidewalks is we put the concrete bed down first and then put the
Of
bricks on
those
top of the
16.
concrete so then they don't walk around as much.
They're just putting them in. And
They're putting them on sand.
12 ranked
and, yeah, it's done.
sidewalks and
After a couple
crosswalks
of years, they
ADA
start to walk
compliant.
around.
As the top priority. 11 of the 16
They are looking at, let me come over there.
as a priority. 10 of the 16 is traffic calming.
Yeah.
I think that
And then there are scores for
they're
other
talking about doing,
collectibles
but
up
yeah,
at the top.
they're thinking about redoing them all, I think. And the phases.
And we'll do the same
Yeah,
for
the next
the
phase.
other two phases.
Right now, what happens, a lot of people that park along here, this parking
Yeah.
is gonna get eliminated right in this location. It's gonna stay squeezed. Once you down at the top of the hill, it'll stay narrow.
Yes,
It's down to where
actually,
people
if
are
you
crossing.
don't mind,
Right now,
there's
people are jumping across right here, and there's this little trail that's down here.
table and collect them. I mean,
And
there's
there's a
enough
little
for.
trail that's gonna get.
We put out 30, and so there's only 16
National Park
here. so-
Service wants to change that and
Okay,
make
help
trail
yourself.
down here. So you can see this right here, this is a rendering.
Just so everyone knows, there's about 4 minutes to wrap up your tabletop discussion, and then we'll conclude this phase.
So that is something that we are looking to work for them. They're gonna be building this piece, and then this would allow that crossing right there. So in a perfect world, we could have a crossing here, and we would have this crosswalk there. And this would be more for the commercial type of traffic, this would be more for the National Park Service. And there's different textures you could use. I mean, we're not married to, the piano, we call this piano keys, just to actually thermoplastic light versus having some type of a texture in the street, a concrete or something like that. Yeah, that's a cemetery entrance.
And I'm not sure where exactly you're considering narrowing the street to start and slow down. But one of the options on the list was the gateway kind of entrance to Gettysburg. Maybe if you combine a gateway, big welcome kind of sign or whatever, with that narrowing, that would give people a big visible, something significant they see, like, oh, I better slow down, I'm entering something here.
I personally love that idea. That's what I wanted to do originally. Over this last couple of cycles, I've been getting down.
What were you thinking about?
Mainly, we were looking at it right here, like we were gonna put the top of this hill, have something that like comes across like this, and it said Gettysburg right here. Right.
Not for that entrance.
Yeah, we were gonna do something like right there, like that. This is the Evergreen Cemetery, this is not the National Park Service. Those folks didn't like that necessarily because it was taken away from their entrance. And the National Park Service folks didn't like that because it was taken away from them. It was not there in 1863.
Sure.
I could see, when we talked about this, 17
Yeah.
they got like,
Yeah, I mean, I think that sense of arrival may get people's attention, and maybe they slow down so they don't mess with their, I don't know if you can, I mean, moving farther down the street, so it's away from everybody.
Once you get into the borough, you could still do that. But I thought we want to still make sure that we calm the traffic away from
The hill's right here, right? Top of the hill.
This is the center of this table is the top of the hill.
All right, if everyone could wrap up your thoughts and return to your tables, we'll recap phase 1 for you and then move on to phase 2.
We take your chair here.
to look into other towns to see what they do, especially in historic.
Okay.
Okay, real quick, before I turn it back over to Jill and we move on to phase 1. And there might be a little bit of explanation on, why we talking about 1 second and 2A first. When the initial master plan was discussed, it was not envisioned that we would do all this project at once. But for economies of scale for both design and engineering and ultimately construction, there is a significant cost savings into treating this as one big project. So that is why we have the 3 phases. And when we did the master plan, we thought the priority phase was actually the middle, the no man's land in between Steinway and the square. So that's why that is labeled as 1 as the priority. So with that said, before we move on to phase 1, I will give you the group consensus on the top 3 priorities. There are 16 of you participating tonight. Of the 16, 12 of you ranked sidewalks and crosswalks with ADA compliance as a priority. 11 of the 16 participating street lighting was a priority, and the third highest priority is actually traffic calming. What surprised me so actually all of the categories on your sheets did have scores in them, but those were the top 3. And just by 1, the fourth highest priority was actually the gateway. So, announcing you have arrived in Gettysburg Borough. That's significant in my mind, that people really like the idea of branding. And identification and sense of place. So with that thought, we will move on to the second phase, which is actually phase 1. It's the no man's land spine between Steinway and Lincoln Square. And while Jill's introducing it, that's going to be in green. So you repeat that same process. Just take 30 seconds, check off your top 3 priorities there, hand them to your table moderators, and I'll collect them.
And I'll just mention about the gateways, as you think about this, we want gateways on all the other entrances to Gettysburg at some point too. So when you come in from Strabane Township, we're starting to think, as a branding. So this is a foray into that. So. Okay. All right, I don't want to take too much time because the conversation is, I think, working very well. So Baltimore Street in the middle. So here's the priorities there. So traffic control, safety for pedestrians, just like we talked about at the southern end. Bus loading and unloading. So lots of school buses, tour buses, and visitors coming in. And we need safe places for those to be able to park, for traffic to be able to get around them, or to at least load and unload and then figure out where they're parking for the long term before they come back and pick everybody up. And then the infrastructure issues, stormwater and sewer. So if you look at the picture on the right, that will give you a chill about what is underneath Gettysburg. So if you're wondering if there are ghosts, that's might be where they are, but don't know. But those are some of our culverts, and that's what they look like. They are aging. That is right behind the Welcome Center. So that's the one that runs diagonally, between Mr. G's and. That corner there. So, and then everybody knows the condition of the Baltimore Street sidewalks. You see a bus there parked. Just really need to facilitate the usage of the space as we look forward. So here's some renderings, an idea of what. There's the traffic light at Lefevre and Baltimore Street. It's that dogleg intersection that's so difficult without the traffic guys in the morning and the afternoon for school. Those guys are amazing. I make them cookies at least 3 times a year because I just think they do the most amazing job of keeping kids safe and motorists moving. But this is one of the ideas of what it could look like to make it ADA compliant and have some wider sidewalks and really just, so the beautification you certainly see, but keep in mind the infrastructure that you don't see that is just as vital. This would be like, redoing your entire kitchen without doing the plumbing and then realizing you have to tear up all the beautiful things you put in so you can go back and fix the plumbing, which you should have done, as part of the larger project to start with. So that's where you are. So you're on phase 1 now. So go back to your small groups and please continue. Thank you.
table ones yet. I don't. Do I have table one?
Gave it to Chad Clabaugh. I gave it to Chad Clabaugh.
So I live in this middle zone, and we desperately need lighting, desperately. It's dark.
You're an expert in this area.
Yeah. We desperately need lighting, we desperately need reworking.
Lighting and sidewalks.
On this one, that Steinway here is right here, so we're just picking up and we're coming in. The Fever Street's here is the traffic signal here. That culvert that Jill was talking about, that's this right here. Yeah, and this is a city project, borough's project. Yeah, so these are one and the same, yeah. Yeah, I'm actually the engineer for the Stormwater Authority and the borough, they kind of work together on that, yeah.
So this is also
Is it possible to have anything removable, like for parades or
I mean,
to have something that's just someone sitting there in the summer
you
wanting
set
to
it in.
Oh, it's terrible.
campground, you're sitting there.
Yeah, you've got to have a light. Same deal
Yeah,
here.
so it seems like there should be something like that.
What do you guys think about, it's one of the questions that I would have is parking spaces here and here.
Yeah, adding them or taking them away?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm allowed to answer yes to a multiple choice question.
There are spaces.
Yeah, there are some spaces in the question. I think more about taking them away. I think that's probably a better answer.
Well, if there's other places to park.
Yeah, so between.
They're kind of underutilized, and one of the thoughts and the ideas was, if you take those away, you can have more space, like there was ice cream here, people spill out onto the streets and stuff because there's so many people on the sidewalks, so you give more space to pedestrians and benches and those kind of things. What if you think that we should keep the spaces there, that's
So you mean
also an
adding
option.
more like options for outdoor seating?
Yeah, exactly.
Along Baltimore Street, places where.
Widening the sidewalk.
Yeah, you can't make new space, so you either gotta have it as parking or place for pedestrians.
And you're just going to encourage parking in the school lots.
Then parking would have to go at the other locations. There's still parking here, all here, all here. Parking, yeah, the school now charges there. So that's usually why this was so underutilized, because everybody parked right here at the school.
Yeah, we get a lot of parking.
Was open to putting bollards.
Did we just put a bus loading in that lane?
Yeah. See that purple block? That's bus. Bus, one here, there's a one here.
So is that up by the Shriver House? Is that what these are? Yep.
Parade route or a closed section of it.
Okay.
That's proposed. So that'd be the.
I think at the Shriver House side was more about thinking about like commercial buses. This was thinking about the rapid transit, and see that little block right there, that's a shelter, bus shelter where
I mean, I love buses. I don't care when they park in front of our place.
this
It makes
has,
it busy, you know?
this has that little square, that'd be a shelter with a bus stop. Shelter with a bus stop.
Yeah.
As of today, the Shriver House is where most buses are parking anyway. That could change depending what might.
That's parking.
Yeah. It'd be nicer having nicer sidewalk, nicer sidewalk, nice trees.
I agree. I think, just seeing how many people end up at Mr. G's and the other places that really have nowhere to sit and are sort of spilling out.
The little yellow dots are lights.
I noticed Jill was taking some pictures. Oh, sure. Okay, sure.
I wonder about.
You got the numbers
how
Not yet.
well advertised.
I'll let you
You're
know.
gonna announce them anyway, right?
Yeah.
Just get them the same time as everybody else.
Because that could really alleviate some of this reliance on parking.
How we doing?
Very pedestrian friendly.
10 minutes in this section, you have
I
5
know,
minutes.
I've only been here 3 months, and I know that when I visited, I didn't realize there was any public transit, and I'm from DC. Sure. I would have been right on that. So, I just had no idea.
I'd say the awareness is very low
Yeah.
among visitors.
You're right.
Yeah. And I'm not even sure how the level of service that rapid transit provides to really realistically get people around town.
We're good. Like I know at the visitor center, we pay to have them, move the traffic from the visitor center down to the cemetery.
I wasn't supposed to, but
But
yes.
other than that, I don't know. I haven't used it.
It's not necessarily safe.
No question about it.
Where are the buses gonna go? I don't know. But the visitor center, that goes. Where are the buses gonna go?
Well, hopefully, hopefully if you get a, once the visitor center's done, and you get lights in, then this becomes the walkthrough. So it may not, it's not.
Really great. I mean, do you have experience working on a street like this in another place? Where you've changed the perception of people driving? So yeah, we have done before. We have a couple here in Gettysburg.
Lights.
Visitor center.
Oh, yeah, change. But again, we, just this walkthrough from Steinwar to downtown is gonna be the, well, the connectivity, you know? Yeah.
Widen the sidewalks, but also tighten
Larger and better sidewalks, lighting, trees. I like the buses, whether it's a shuttle,
So that's kind of the
village buses, boys buses, but less parking.
You never know,
For regular
you never know in the future what kind of shuttle they might have.
No, I like that, especially if with street light right here. So if they're parking over here, they can cross over here. But I agree.
It also reinforces that, small town charm that people are coming here for a station to have more.
But it's also,
I like the
It's
idea.
fair to say that I could summarize our group's discussion that wider sidewalks in favor of more parking.
We want cobblestone streets.
Close down.
No trucks.
Can you, just one bus parking there, or?
We thought about maybe making it so that you could stack two there. It's kind of a decent amount of space there, really.
Is that the school district, or?
The Fever Street's the boroughs. The sidewalk is probably I know that the school district built that sidewalk. I don't know exactly where the right-of-way is on that drawing, but there is
There is space there.
there's at some point we're going to be on the school district's property versus the boroughs.
I think a second spot for motor coach parking somewhere in there. Maybe it's in addition to that bus there. Could be, because one bus in there, if there's only one spot, as soon as you get one bus, then I'm not sure what you do with the second one, and there often would be more than one. That image that you saw.
Well, we still need to explore the idea of bus parking versus loading and unloading.
Yeah.
So there is that element to it. We need safe places for buses to get kids or tour groups on and off. Sure. But then we need bus parking somewhere, so while those groups are touring, then the bus can come back for them at that same spot, but not be there the whole time.
And that's a good point. This is more envisioned as an unloading bus spaces versus parking, right? You unload and then you go park, and then they get ice cream, and then the bus comes back in an hour or two. And
Just like they do in New York City. They don't park, they load, unload, and
load and go.
Keep going, that's right.
Okay, let's give it one more minute of tabletop discussions, and we'll regroup as a large group.
And like Charles said, that this was called Phase 1. This also is at the bottom of the hill, and if you know anything about utilities, you build down to up. So all the water goes downhill, so you've got to start at the bottom of the hill. So the stormwater in the second phase doesn't work. You can't build that first. So if we ever get construction funding in pieces, this is the phase
All the
we have to
utilities
do.
on this side? Where are all the utilities?
So you can see the storm drains with a black dash line. You see the black dash line? Same. The whole way up the street. You have to circle the point now, the black dash line, the whole way up that.
Yeah, I know.
This, oh, I'm sorry, it's not black, it's blue. Yeah. This line right here is a storm drain, inlet. The idea is to bring it this way. so that you
Okay,
fill this
my
up.
timer says time to regroup. So if you could return to your tables and have a seat, and let's recap this. And don't worry, we're going to have a larger conversation at the end as a large group where we can have Peter doodle in real time. So some of your ideas, I hear some good ideas coming out of you. We'll see what that visually looks like when Peter gets to work there. The tallies for Phase 1. We have a tie. So I'm going to do 4 priorities in this category. 11 of you said that the priority for Phase 1 was sidewalks and crosswalks, AD compliance. So that's the second time that was ranked in the top 3. We also have 11 of you said that street lighting is of priority for Phase 1. Also in Phase 1, traffic light at Lefevre and South Streets was ranked as a priority, and a very close third or fourth, depending on your perspective, with 6 of you said storm drainage and storm water management, which surprises me, frankly, because that's an under-the-ground thing. You don't see it, but that means we're all aware of the issues, infrastructure issues that we have to deal with here in Gettysburg. So thank you for that.
Love it.
Yeah.
When it rains hard, I do see it coming down the street in front of the rough house. I mean, it.
Hold on a second. Let's get you on mic for that, okay?
I don't want to be on TV. When it rains, that water does flood down the street right in front of the Rupp House and the ice cream Mr. G's. I mean, I've almost looked at cars and wondered if they're going to float away, parked cars there, because the water gets high enough to meet those cars' door,
Yeah.
the car doors. So
let's do this. When we circle back at the end of this as a large group, Chad, if you don't mind making that a note to address that very concerning issue when we talk about Phase 1 as a larger group, okay? Let's move on to the final phase, which is daunting but also exciting. So that is Phase 2B.
2A.
2A, sorry, my bad. Yes, 2B.
A.
2A, sorry. Okay.
Or not to be, yeah.
Or not to be. To be or
One
not
where
to
the
be.
square is.
Yeah, 2A. So quickly take a couple minutes a couple seconds to fill those out, turn them over to your table moderator, and we will continue the same process that we just did for the first 2. So Jill, you want to give us a brief introduction while the folks are filling their sheets out?
Sure, I'm really curious of how many voted for the stormwater infrastructure after they saw the picture of the culvert. Just saying. So, yeah, it is. The visuals are really alarming. Okay, so Phase 2A is Lincoln Square. So here we are at the north end of the project. So again, here's our very familiar list: safe pedestrian sidewalks and crossings, parking and deliveries. Those are issues clearly on Lincoln Square. Public assembly, you may have noticed, we have a lot of First Amendment things that are happening on Lincoln Square. It's highly visible. The borough processes a lot of permits for that, and that needs to be addressed from a safety perspective, as we talked earlier about, security and barricades and things, so that, we can allow those, certainly allow the First Amendment, because I would never say otherwise, but allow it in a way that people can be protected in exercising that right. Bus loading and unloading, we had a good conversation here at Table 1 talking about there's a difference between bus loading and unloading and bus parking. So we need places that buses can load and unload people, and then the bus needs to park elsewhere and then come back for those people and load them back on in that space, but so that we don't have buses just staying downtown in those spaces. And then stormwater and sewer. So you're starting to see the kind of the lay of the land here. So this is what we're looking at now. Some more current infrastructure pictures. Again, the high-speed crash that happened at the building at the south end of the street, the fiery crash that happened in the circle, kind of scary. And then, of course, everybody knows what our sidewalks unfortunately look like. Safety considerations. So obviously we can't get rid of trucks. That bypass failed, 30 years ago now. And they talked about it from the 60s to the 90s. And they never exercised that opportunity, and it is gone. So unfortunately, we're dealing with trucks. This is a state route, and we have to accommodate that. That goes back to what PennDOT will allow this project to be, because it has to have those accommodations. So back out parking is a problem in as much as PennDOT does not look favorably anymore. They will not approve projects that have you backing out into oncoming traffic. That is not... from a safety perspective, it's not a good design. So And then just the volume of traffic. Other safety, we've already talked about buses. I won't belabor that. Services, so, trash deliveries. Yeah, Dave, these are all your deliveries. Those
Not picking on one here.
Not picking on Dave, no. But it does present, it does illustrate the issue of what happens all around the square is because that there just really isn't, there isn't an accommodation for this. And oftentimes, the trucks are double parked in the traffic circle, as you see the Coca-Cola truck. And people get trapped in those parking spaces. And there's probably better ways for us to address that, and I think that's one of the things we need to think about. Going back to the people thing, so you've got First Amendment, we've got crosswalk issues. So if you can't see the person in black between the two black cars, that's why I circled them on the slide. You just need to make sure that we're doing our best to protect our pedestrians. And then, of course, the events that we have downtown are growing, which is a great thing for our economic development and for tourism overall for Gettysburg and Adams County. But again, we have to really we have to be prepared to deal with the changing atmosphere that we have to accommodate events, so that we don't have catastrophes. And then, of course, the hot button issue is parking. So I'm going to play something. If you all were here at the last time that we did, is it not going to play? Peter, can you maybe hit that play video on my screen there? Maybe.
Sorry, where is it linked?
It's linked on the slide. Oops.
Sorry, I did it.
It's all right.
Oh, here it is.
Let's see if it'll go.
Most people don't realize the actual size of parking lots, and as a result, you've probably fallen for an illusion that a lot of people never notice. First, let's say you're going to Walmart to get a few things. So you pull into the parking lot.
One second.
Sorry.
Technology.
Technology's helping us.
Just need to escape.
Does it work on there?
I think we just gotta minimize that.
Most people don't realize the actual size of parking lots, and as a result, you've probably fallen.
Yeah, click on this one here. And then let's hit escape.
Nope. Oh.
Is this like a separate screen we can move it to?
Glad it's not us at home that have that trouble.
Go back to that one.
This one?
Jill, do you have the link? You can go online. Yeah, let's close it out.
If you drag it to your left, drag it now. Screen, if you drag the whole thing.
There it is. Perfect.
It's like another monitor.
Walk in the store, get a few groceries, some new towels, and more toothpaste. You check out, people don't realize the actual size of parking lots, and as a result, you've probably fallen for an illusion that a lot of people never notice. First, let's say you're going to Walmart to get a few things. So you pull into the parking lot, walk in the store, get a few groceries, some new towels, and more toothpaste. You check out, go back to your car, and probably think nothing of this. Next, you drive to your city's downtown for lunch and get frustrated when all of the parking spots in front of the restaurant are taken. So you end up having to park a few blocks down. It might feel like you had to walk forever to get to the restaurant and back to your car, but it turns out this was actually no further than your quick trip to Walmart. And there's two reasons why it doesn't feel like it. First is the sight lines. In a massive parking lot, you get a clear view of your destination as you approach it. In a city, though, everything becomes human scale. You pass visual cues that block your sight lines and give you a sense of distance traveled. But there's also the expectation of dedicated parking. In the US, people are so used to going to a dedicated parking lot to visit one business. And when we can't park directly in front of the business, it doesn't align with that expectation. Even if parking a block down is no different than parking at the end of a Walmart parking lot.
Oh, and then we'll watch Superman. So. Thanks, Todd.
Yeah.
All right, so now I need your PowerPoint back.
Okay, well, good luck with that.
Is it on your desktop here?
If you click on PowerPoint, it'll probably be the last one that goes open.
So while they're getting the technical difficulties, I'll try to be the MC and fill the void. So that was an interesting video. I was aware of the concepts presented in the video, and then I watched the video, and it really drove it home. One of the pictures that Jill's trying to find is an image, there it is, an overlay image of our Racehorse Alley parking garage, and then you see Lincoln Square. And in a 45-degree angle, the footprint of Walmart and its parking lot is overlaid with essentially the middle of Walmart, essentially the electronics section in Walmart, is Lincoln Square. And that is in the same footprint as Walmart's parking lot as it relates to our Racehorse Alley garage. So you're walking no further than you are for a trip to Walmart. So just think about those types of parking amenities, philosophies, concepts as you're getting into your tabletop exercises.
So,
Go ahead, 15 minutes.
go. We're getting good at this.
Yep. Charles Strauss is starting with the elephant in the room.
All right, I'm gonna sit down right here.
This part of the gateway of the plan, do we have our alleys directors? Maybe that's all, I guess. I think what it said in your options about revitalizing, is that the word? Here we are at the Lincoln Square.
I totally agree with that.
Attached rendering, just to mock up rendering of the suggestion. I know a little bit about this mock-up, so I'm just going to talk about it. So it looks like what we have here is there's no parking around the square. You still got plenty of traffic flow, at least the minimum that PennDOT will allow.
Yes, I totally agree
Something
with
must
that.
have for,
That's
specifically for the trucks. But a note on the trucks, just a personal note, by doing this, something like this, yes, they can still go through, but it's going to slow them down. It's going to slow them down for a while they're going through, and it's going to slow down their journey that they take every day. And eventually, they might just look for a different route that is a little bit faster for them. I'm just saying, it makes sense business-wise. There's a limit. They're sure, yeah, but they keep pushing it and plowing through. And if you've ever sat on the square, especially if you've sat dining on the square, it gets pretty noisy and loud. And the building rumble. I have an historic building, and I've literally had framed artwork on the walls that have fallen down and broken because of the trucks driving through. So anywho, it looks like, as I said, no parking on the square, but lots of pedestrian area on the square. The square traffic flow is still plenty there. There's a little bit of landscaping opportunity. There's definitely gathering opportunities, as you can see on these quads, for not just for outdoor dining. We've got the one Lincoln right here at the Hotel Gettysburg. We've got Blue and Gray. We've got the pub and restaurant. We also have Plowman's over here that has a little beer garden, a cider garden.
Any parking spaces?
It does, and I don't know if anybody has an idea on that.
Does it complicate what? Sorry.
Deliveries.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody has an idea on that, but I was as I was watching it, as earlier we were talking about coach buses not necessarily parking, but dropping off. I was wondering if that is a possibility of a delivery area that's specified for deliveries. Well, I'm just specifically talking about in front of Blue and Gray because I've never seen deliveries to the hotel. They're in the back. I've never seen deliveries to the pub. They're in the back. And the cider doesn't have, to my knowledge, the cider house doesn't have deliveries at the front. But even if they did, and even one day, God forbid, we have a different restaurant here at the hotel, a different restaurant here at the pub. If we had something here at the Blue and Gray, couldn't they all share it? If there was a drop-off, there was a dedicated delivery area in front of Blue and Gray, which definitely needs it. They don't have room in the back. There's no access in the back for truck deliveries. If there was something there, and this person needed it, this person needed to park there, unload, and walk it across to that destination. But this one needs, that's just my 2 cents.
Let me jump in. So you know, I'm stealing Peter's thunder a little bit. Peter's the one that kind of put together this rendering. We put a lot of time and thought into it. And the first thing I want you to do is think about these remote places, truck deliveries, deliveries, and that's hard bus drop-offs very similarly. They're kind of the same thing. The window. Chad's right. Most of the issues, all of Jill's pictures that she has are right here. So we are concerned about that. But this is where we have most buses. This is where they have the van drop-offs, and as was shown in this photo. This is right here, this is the parklet. And so like the bands come in here and they drop off their band equipment and they have music and stuff. And so people do drop off right here on this. So what we've done, you can see it right here, right here. Right here, right here. There is actually a location that is, yeah, and what it would be is instead of having like a 4.8 inch reveal curve, it would be like a 4-inch reveal, or you'd feel like you're getting off the road, a location where a bus could stop and unload, or a delivery truck and unload, and then once they're gone, that would turn back into kind of safe pedestrian space.
I like getting rid of all the parking there. I think that is.
Well, it's similar to what we were talking about earlier on the road walk from Baltimore Street, you know, and that you just want to see the buildings, you want to see the people. Visiting our events, I don't want to sit too.
So, let me jump in real quickly. One of the things which is so interesting about doing this is that we literally looked at, and you could probably see it, so can I borrow this pen? If you could see it where the car's actually driving, so we literally just said, okay, what space is not being utilized by cars at the moment? And so we drew that line in there, which is actually what PennDOT really needs for trucks and everybody else. Now, having done that, and because now you're getting all that space for pedestrians, and you're removing all of the, you know, coin meters and all the other stuff, you know, that deal with cars, you're increasing each quadrant by 40%. That means 40% more of anything that you have, tables, you know, games, whatever you want to do.
That's the current.
Well, it's both.
I see
It's both.
It's right. It's almost there, exactly. So it's right back there, so right between that line and yeah, it's like right here, right.
It'd be much easier to keep it secure for events too. You can get those things right up through the streets.
So we would also have some bollards in those locations. Of course, we're like an urban area for deliveries, they were either removable or not. But we still have bollards at all the other locations.
That's right, put the most sophisticated of that sort of security in the square.
Yeah. And the idea, of course, is whenever, you know, you're trying to also deliveries that they need to be delivered at a certain time. You don't want to deliver in the middle of an event, right? But when the event is on, then that space that's utilized by buses or delivery, all of a sudden, they can pull out tables, they can pull out anything else, it becomes part of the using the space.
Great idea.
Is it safe to say that the table is unanimous and that we would rather see the parking eliminated?
100%.
Yes.
Anybody here that would rather see the parking kept?
No, but I know from previous meetings, you know, all the business owners in that area are going to protest that.
Because there's enough here
Does the
But no,
garage get full?
I think it makes for a better experience.
Is there available utilization of the garage?
Most often the garage has availability. Very seldomly full. There are
Yeah.
but very seldomly.
And so, one of the things that the movie actually doesn't talk about, which is the
Right,
effect of
but you're
like
pushing
a
this
regular
out,
mall.
so.
If you think about the way they designed the mall, they make it so that you have two anchors
This is
and then small shops in between. And so when you park here, you want to go there, you walk through all the shops and you walk back. The reason for that is because they're spreading the wealth, they're spreading the possibility of people buying everywhere else. I used actually.
So then the other issue, I
to be
also
separate
want
from where the
First
main
Amendment
part
for
is,
as,
you're increasing the possibility of people being able to shop in all the little shops versus just the one in front where
I
they're
would
parking in
like to
front of
say
and get back in the car and
squares
take
not
off.
the place.
So there are multiple reasons why
that is the most
parking in the
dangerous
center or part of a
traffic
community like this,
intersection.
it's absolutely critical.
Yeah,
I would
traffic
imagine
coming
too,
from
once the
every
Will's house is
direction.
open too, the bus
People have enough
drop-off would be
hard
critical
time of going traffic
on the
circles.
square as well.
Then you have distractions on every
think it's
corner
unsafe.
with
Every
people
time
also
I've parked
standing
there,
out
I'm
with
terrified to back out.
That's
I know,
impossible.
Yeah,
honestly, right?
Terrified.
I avoid parking in the square
Gosh, you're
myself
right.
Yeah.
for that reason.
We have a
And
beautiful court,
Yeah.
we have a beautiful
funny is
courthouse, we have a library,
Safer way
still
to do
get
it
a lot
is
of
to back
traffic
in.
thing.
Right, it's
But
better to back in and
they're
pull out.
always
Ironically, for some reason, if you go to New Oxford, they have a roundabout where they say it's no backing parking.
Most of the time they don't show.
They say that, but now PennDOT
But
Today's world, they won't even.
I would approach it more as a global safety
This is
issue.
grandfathered in.
Interesting.
Right. I will say in the quadrant in front of the hotel, you know, they have, I don't know if it's 4 spots or something for people when they're registering, they can park for like 15 minutes to go and register, unload.
Yeah.
I mean, that's certainly a convenience for the hotel and kind of an expectation of visitors, so I'm not sure how that could be accommodated.
The alley,
Yeah.
you could do that in the alley.
Yeah, and where are you considering that, like that one at the hotel, that little square that I drew? I think it could be for that same purpose. It doesn't have to be just for a charter bus.
Yeah.
It could be for a person dropping off their luggage,
You could do it in an alley, but most people that are arriving there have never been to Gettysburg
Right,
aren't
they
gonna know how to
don't
find
know, sure.
that alley right when they arrive.
This always cracks me up because I watch it all the time. They go in basically like the 2 lanes of activity to the front desk, only to be told whether they're supposed to be or not. That's what happens now. There's an entrance back here. If I were the customer, I'm having people tell me where it's parked. Unless you don't
We're playing Frogger.
It's like you're going there anyway. You're going there anyway.
Once you know, but if you don't, then people will be circling the square because they don't know, you know, they see the hotel, but now what?
happening there. If traffic called me, you know, big,
Well, it could be. It could be a quick, like, drop off.
traffic called me because it just
Is there anything else, not to dispute, obviously the square is walking around, is there anything else on that drawing that you have? There isn't a whole lot that you're planning on doing on this end, most of the improvements are for the next 2 blocks up to where the next phase. You can see that phase line where we stopped.
Is it mainly redoing the sidewalks, lighting, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, sidewalks, there isn't a whole lot of like eliminating parking and stuff in these 2 blocks because there's a lot of it that's used by turn lanes. There is traffic signals at both of those areas. So you have to have the turn lane to traffic signals. So you can't really bump the curbs in and out or sidewalks.
And
Yeah, there's already traffic.
enough lights, I don't think speed's really an issue there.
Not as much, speed isn't really a big issue.
As much.
Traffic lights.
And I wouldn't really advocate eliminating any more parking because if we're getting rid of the parking in the square, you need to have someplace, you know, close by.
Has there ever been a consideration for another parking garage, another part of,
Yeah, they need it.
you know, thinking of the anchor stores that we
Yeah.
just heard about, anchor parking garages, you know, to buttress the.
I guess you can't see on there, Chad, can you? Yeah. Oh, you can. Right, because it's with that pen, there's some parking, you see that? That's actually a borough park. That's a parking
Yeah, I use that a lot.
Do you talk about maybe putting a little parking garage there? It's not very much space.
How many spots?
It's a whole nother road beside that, but they're not, I mean, they're not.
The Racehorse Alley garage, was that constructed to possibly add floors to it? Would it support that?
They've already added more floors than the original design was only half tall.
Really?
They added 2 more, and I don't know that they should add any more.
Okay.
Structural engineers, the president of my company is actually the one that designed that many years ago.
Yeah.
That works, but that was part of.
Just curious, because that way you don't have to find more land, you know. And the Gateway Station project, does that include any public parking in there? Okay.
Yeah, it does. Because the retail.
But not like a
For the retail.
yeah, but
There's no like,
mass.
For the residents.
for their retail
Yeah.
and their residents.
So not-
That means anybody can go, I guess, their park.
I think I know the answer, but I'm gonna ask anyway. The railroad. Arms, lighted, crosswalk.
Generation mall.
It was painted and then someone came and did work, they painted it back. There's no safe crosswalk
If
at
they
the
are
railroad
fire
tracks.
trucks, they just back in.
Well, it is dangerous. I think that probably handicap parking is probably.
It was painted and then somebody came and did work and then they never came back is that CSX and is that their property? It's not safe.
And one of the issues.
There's no real safe crosswalk.
Right, other side of the tracks, right now, there's storm drains.
Yeah, so that you. out the same way you do. Yeah,
where water
yeah,
comes
yeah,
out.
no backing out.
Real
Because
long
PennDOT
troughs.
is really not, yeah, they would not approve
They
a
don't
plan
allow for a
to
crosswalk.
be backing
So
out.
whenever we do this, I'm seeing blue dashed line or the stormwater plan, and you see that there, it says drain stem and run. So now we're gonna take all the stormwater, fix other drainage issues, pipe it, so we can get rid of those things and add a crosswalk. That's a good point. You definitely do want to add some.
I mean, I know we need to do all the infrastructure underneath, but once it's done, there's gotta be some safe, even if it's temporary.
We have about 1 minute in this segment, if you could wrap up your conversations.
Are all the utilities under the road or under the sidewalk?
Like I know in the business, we do it all the time. Cemetery, whatever they do.
They're both, yeah. I'm gonna say
Inspiration guy, get those, whether it's a fair or whether figure out how to make it free, so to speak.
So when you
This is paid
do all
for it
the
so that they can get
sidewalks,
Yeah.
Like old
any utilities, are they generally old or are they gonna be replaced?
We used to have charges here way back.
Yeah, we're talking 4 million of the 17 million
That
is
would be
going
such a
into
good
the water and sewer.
Yeah.
Any thoughts,
Well, rapid transit is.
overhead
definitely-
utility lines? Those are the ugliest
Bury those
thing, I mean,
lines. What's up?
that's,
Talk to Sarah Kip from the planning commission, talk about
Yeah.
And the ghost poles, we
We
all
would
know
love
about
to
the
get rid
ghost
of,
poles.
it is such
Yeah.
such a huge issue, because we then have to rewire the roads out.
Yeah.
I'm in overhead right now, like you came in underground, inside your house is wired, and you can never tell what's running. It's millions and millions and millions.
I know, it's just, those poles just,
We would love to do that.
Any thoughts on our sidewalk crosswalks around the square? This may help slow the traffic.
Okay.
Because it's bottlenecking the traffic and then it's.
I hate to break up the conversations because I know there's a lot of good conversations happening. I deliberately expedited these tabletop sessions simply because in eavesdropping on all of your conversations, there's some really good ideas coming forward. And so I wanted to spend a little extra time talking as a group of 16 plus the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 7 staff that we have in here. So I'm going to have Peter fire up his machine over there. While he's doing that, I will give you the tallies for Lincoln Square Corridor Phase 2A. Interesting numbers coming out of this, and while there's not a tie per se, there are 2 categories that I would think are very closely related. And so I'll give those numbers to you individually, and then if we group them together, it's actually the winner in this group, okay? First, with 11 of you saying that deliveries, bus loading and unloading is the top priority for this corridor. Interesting. The second top priority is the revitalization of and collective parking. 8 of you of the 16 ranked that as a top priority. 7 of you, sidewalks and crosswalks, ADA compliance. That is the winner across the entire 1 mile stretch. So I think the message there is loud and clear. We got to deal with ADA accessibility issues and pedestrian safety. If you combine barricade security and events, they're very closely related. The reason we need the barricades is because we have large events. So and perhaps they should not be broken out into 2 categories. Individually, 5 of the 16 said barricade security is a priority, and 7 says events is a top priority. So if you combine those, the 5 and the 7, you're going to get 12. Some type of security as it relates to events is a top priority. So I just find that to be very, very fascinating that the way the group is thinking. So before we get into the group discussion, I just want to take a minute before I forget that I'm enjoying listening to the conversations here tonight. I think this is exceptionally productive workshop for everyone. I hope you're enjoying this time as well, batting around these ideas. Obviously, the 16 of you that are participating are not, not a representative sample of the larger community, but in this group, obviously, there's some disparate ideas and some congruent ideas, which is why we're here, and I'm sure that others that are watching at home are probably of the same mind as many of you here. So with that, let's circle back to the first phase on the south end, and we're going to repeat these, and I'll take the hand mic. And this is where we kind of ask Peter to sketch concepts that you've all talked about at your tables and go from there. So the south end, it was phase 2A, I believe. Is that the south end?
No, 2B.
2B, sorry.
2B, okay, great.
So if anyone has a question or a comment, an idea you would like to see Peter draw for you, raise your hand. I'll bring this around. And I know in the second phase we'll deal with the stormwater issue. But just so we repeat, the top priorities the group identified here are street lighting, sidewalks, ADA compliance, and traffic calming, Peter. So, and then the gateways was a close fourth priority. Anyone have thoughts on how you would design this if you had your option? Yes, sir.
So one of the thoughts that I had was something like a median island in the middle of the roadway to kind of force cars to, like, oh, I see this thing in the center, I have to kind of adjust where I'm going. It creates a little bit of a pedestrian safety island in the center. So you can put some crosswalks across it, and it kind of gives you that visual, okay, I'm now entering somewhere a bit more habited.
Yeah, so that would be similar to what we currently have in Broadway. This is interesting internally. This concept has not come up. I think it's an idea worth batting around. I don't know what the Park Service would think of this. But it is a different type of gateway. It definitely is a calming, a traffic calming feature, which is a goal. So any other thoughts on what something like this could potentially do?
Well, our group talked about same stretch, the goal of traffic calming and then a sense of arrival, a gateway. Instead of something down the middle, which we didn't think about, was maybe, narrowing, maybe taking the, narrowing where the parking is, bump outs or whatever, to give the people driving in from into town, that way they can see if there's a gateway, some big, kind of welcome to Gettysburg, they see that as a sense of arrival and they're entering a place. And then if the street narrows, the traffic calming, the two combined might cause people to slow down and accomplish both goals.
I'll give this to Dave Petters, and then I have a question for our PennDOT experts.
Is this, I'm sorry, is this what we were saying, like narrowing in both sides of it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Will all above-ground utilities be placed underground, and will that start there? Power, all the other ones?
I think you'd have a unanimous yes if we could figure out how to make that happen. We know how to make it happen, but we need a partner in MedEd. MedEd has always kind of poo-pooed that. I'm not going to be bashful about saying it because it's just factual. But obviously the aesthetic would be phenomenal if we could figure out how to do that. But it also comes at a significant cost. Not part of the scope here, unfortunately. Our PennDOT folks, so what would PennDOT's view of some type of long boulevard type feel be to this stretch?
Maybe to start off my answer.
Oh, if you could make sure your mic is.
There we go. I just want to acknowledge that this idea here is what we're currently rolling with, and just to kind of elaborate on this idea for what we've discussed with PennDOT so far is take it south, even. Take it south of the borough line, start it down at the bottom of the hill, this like reduced, as you're entering that battlefield, it immediately just comes up on your right, right? And so maybe starting it down that far, so by the time you get to like the gateway area, you essentially have affected reduced speeds, and you've really introduced in the context of the road by that point. But this is our current idea. In terms of like putting that like channelizing island out there, they would have a little bit of concern, more probably just there's not enough room to like shift the traffic, like the length of roadway to safely shift them away from that obstacle without impacting the National Park Service. Curb side of the road would probably be their take on that.
Would that also essentially act as a chicane type feel?
So a
to the road?
chicane is a more kind of like you reduce speeds by moving them to the left and to the right and to the left. It could be dramatic, or it can be taken out over a longer period of time. So it's a gradual left and right kind of feel to it. So, so chicane, we also talked about that in the field. So if we were to take what was the kind of like bring the curb lines in and take that south, you have a much longer space to bring a chicane through, like a gradual chicane south of the cemetery there.
So,
and maybe one more point I want to make clear about this location. So you can't tell from the aerial, but for those that drive the road regularly, you'll notice that area where the arrow is, with the grassy kind of note there, that's the kind of the top of a vertical curve, so a hump in the road, right? And then so you're coming up, and then you hit that, and then it's downhill heading into town. And so dealing with that kind of that part of the roadway when it comes to traffic calming, that's kind of going to be our challenge. So we don't want to, let's say, introduce a crossing that's on the backside of that hill, because then now we're promoting crossings in an area that essentially the motorists don't have line of sight to. So just an important feature, geographic feature of that part of the roadway in this phase to keep in mind.
The question I had about, you mentioned, move this down south of the borough limit. That would put us into Cumberland Township, which creates a funding problem, I would think, because our applications are just for construction in the borough. We don't have Cumberland on board, so is that an insurmountable task in your mind, or we really haven't talked about
Chad is motioning no.
So I don't think so, Charles. It's a good question. Something we would certainly want to look into, but I don't think it's an issue because I believe all of the improvements that Todd is discussing would happen within the PennDOT right-of-way. So I think PennDOT has more say over that right-of-way than what the township would. So, and I mean, we would have to talk to the township, get their approval, but I don't know that they would have any objections to what he's talking about.
I agree with you. You slow them down before they get to the borough line. But if that's not a concern, I think let's have that conversation and see where it goes.
Maybe that brings up a good point, is that so this project delivery is being done under PennDOT's, let's say, project delivery process. So it complies with how they would do their own project. And so we're not doing this in a vacuum, with PennDOT as like a stakeholder, but we're more or less like partnered with PennDOT in order to deliver this design.
Other thoughts, comments, concerns? Yes.
I was just wondering, and this is a Park Service question, but just psychologically, if we had signs, I mean, you just look at that picture and you're passing by the most sacred land in our town and the most highly respected. And if there were signs, just psychological signs that you're passing a national cemetery, and with there's three terms that go along with that, and start those signs sooner and make it more elite. Like you've got to slow down because you're passing a sacred cemetery of war heroes. That just might psychologically help a driver slow down. Insist. We're expecting you to respect where you are. So I'm just thinking maybe more signage of that nature, government signage. I mean, maybe government signage.
Well, real quick. Believe me, the signage is on our radar. Those blue signs, welcome to Gettysburg.
But it would be
cemetery. Yeah.
Like you're at Arlington,
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, similar. Yeah, I agree. Similar to what I think the national park already has, or the foundation has. It's the national park. So when you're coming into town from Baltimore and it's on your left, there's this entranceway that's very majestic looking and very respectful looking and very, this is sacred ground. And it just naturally, the aesthetic of it, I don't know if you remember, you know where I'm talking?
Yeah.
If that,
There's on
if
Bal-
something
the
like
Baltimore
that
Street.
were on, on Baltimore Street on the left-hand side, as you're coming into town, and you're going over there to the, I guess it's the visitor center, there's this very majestic look of that entryway.
The black gates, yeah.
And that would be something very nice to see all the way through there.
So Peter, in the interest of time, if you might just kind of take a few liberties, put something you think that works based on the comments here and what Todd's comments are, and then get the group to react to what we see as a plausible, functional option, okay? So do that while we're wrapping up our comments. Any other thoughts or ideas? Table 3, anything?
Visitor center.
What's that?
That's on the other side, that's on the tiny town.
He's amazing. Wait until you see what he can do.
See something really kind of stark, National Cemetery, National Heritage.
Just trying to expedite the conversation.
Respect.
Yes,
blah, blah, blah,
yes,
blah.
throughout.
Yeah, just. so that
Anyone
just-
else on table 3? Table 1?
We demand it.
So Charles, can I?
Table 2, yes.
I can weigh in, Charles. Just
Or Chad.
one thing real quick. So one of the things that came up at our table was the idea of an actual gateway. Whenever we think of a gateway, like an arch over top of the road that says like Gettysburg, you know, in wrought iron or something like that. We had talked about different ideas with like maybe gas lanterns on the side, and I explained to the table that we had taken that idea to the Evergreen Cemetery folks, to the National Park Service, and it was kind of, at the time, it was a discussion that it wasn't going to be well received by the National Park Service or by the Evergreen Cemetery folks, just because it was a little bit too in the face or distracting or taking away from the National Park Services. It just wasn't there in 1863 type of a thing. That was the discussion. So we kind of got away from that archway type of a gateway, but I just want to let you know that we did have that discussion. I know that came up at our table, so I wanted to mention that did come up a little bit.
But what about signs on the side, not an archway, but something lower to the
Yeah,
ground?
so we did propose signs. I don't know that that's off the table. Again, the National Park Service was pushing back even with we wanted to put lights up to kind of help to light it up a little bit, have this squeezing feel to calm traffic. Even that was like, lights weren't there in 1863. And I said, well, neither were the Cobra heads that are overhead, and those are kind of uglier, in my opinion. So the idea was to eliminate the Cobra heads and put in some decorative street lights. But they're sensitive to any improvements in front of the National Park Service. So we would love to do some signs. I think that's still on the table. But we would have to be sensitive about what we pick.
We had actually talked about some type of, waist-high type pillar with a gas light on top of it, something like you see it on the side of ABC. Something that is a throwback to the history, the heritage lighting, but it's not offensive. But conversations led in a different direction, so.
What's
how do you need, Peter?
What's nice about adding more green space, taking out that parking lane, moving the curb lines in, is it gives you more opportunity to do roadside, gateway treatments without encroaching into the battlefield area.
So I think, this idea here basically is just bringing the curb out, leaving exactly what is needed for each travel lane, and then maybe putting some signs that actually talk about, be respectful and all that, because we're in the park, right? Anything else?
Were there any ideas about texture differences in the road surface?
I think that came up did that come up in table 3?
Yeah, we talked about what's proposed, whatever map that was proposed in the original design, right? The sort of brick-looking crosswalk. The brick-looking crosswalk. That's on the, yeah. And then I think for the gateway, right, you still have the proposal for the shrubs, right, on both sides of the road. And I know there was a lot of talking about lighting, but I think we still have the two lights at the gateway. right?
Yep.
So you have that. You have the bump outs, so you're looking at coming up the hill, right, at the crest of the hill. You have the two lines of shrubs, the historic lights. Then just after that, you've got the bump outs down to the brick-looking, I'm calling it, crosswalk, right? There was proposed to be a sidewalk on the other side of the road. There's one on the left. They were proposing to have one on the right, but we didn't want people crossing at the top of the hill, right? So we're going to move our trail, right, because there's nowhere to go either. So we're going to move our trail. You can come out of the cemetery, go across that crosswalk, get on a trail into the park, or make the left and go down the other side. So I think, overall, you're going from kind of dark and open. As soon as you hit that gateway, you're going to light and narrow. Might work.
Thank you. Yes, Charles.
On that topic of ADA compliant sidewalks, are those ADA compliant with those lights and utility lines like that currently? Probably not, right?
I can wait.
I was just wanting to note that we said that was a priority, and
The width-wise, it is.
It is, okay.
Believe it or not, they just replaced the sidewalks, and the bricks that they used are already probably not ADA compliant. There's a lot of things that go into ADA compliance. Width-wise, it's wide enough for ADA compliance.
So in the interest of time, and honestly, the staff tonight wasn't quite sure how this format was going to work, and I think it's working very well. And it's going to inform our meeting for next week. So what I'm thinking is we kind of stop here with the design, Peter.
Okay.
And then maybe this week you can massage this and come back with something that looks a little more finessed.
Yeah.
And then that's where we start our conversation next week. And then recap, of course, but I think maybe this will be the starting point for next week for this phase. The other thing I would like to definitely double down on, if you're able to scroll further north in this corridor to the curve where the traffic accident happened and the vehicle hit. Deliveries is also an issue in this corridor, so I think we should talk about that next week. And then also some more safety considerations perhaps as it relates to that turn right there around
Like where
Rita's.
Rita's is?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Charles, that was probably the number one thing from table number one was about our master plan had a crosswalk where all the parking is for the Gettysburg Welcome Center there, Max's parking, and how people just cross the road right there. Table number one was almost thinking that crosswalk is the priority over the crosswalk at the cemetery. So we wouldn't necessarily want to sacrifice that one, and only because PennDOT had some concerns about having both. I mean, the one, because they would consider that a signalized traffic crossing when they have the push button there when it's flashing. So I do want to mention that was, at least this table was thinking that was probably the highest priority there.
I think we talked about that same concept.
Anything to wrap up phase 2B? 2B? Okay, let's move on to phase 1. Right down the spine, the middle between essentially Lefevre Street and the courthouse. Just to recap there, I know ADA accessibility sidewalks was the priority of the group. Also, street lighting and a storm water management and drainage. Those were the top three identified.
I think, wasn't the traffic signal on there as well?
That was, yeah, you're right. So there's really a tie for the top two. So if you consider those, there's the fourth one, but it was a high priority, a traffic light. What do you think this looks like, Peter?
Let's see.
While Peter's pulling that up, anyone want to address anything related to your thoughts on that?
promotional material for Gettysburg could somehow bring forth the ideas that we mentioned about the cemetery and the being respectful coming in, and maybe that would be corny for some people, but slowing down. Get that idea before they ever hit town.
We own it.
So right now, speed limit's 25. That's a state PennDOT rules and regs, I believe. The issue, and Chief Glennie says this in a lot of times, to the pedestrian, a 25-mile-an-hour vehicle feels like and perhaps looks like it's actually speeding when it's actually not. So there might be a perception thing there. I do believe, though, there are a lot of speeding issues in the borough, not just here, but everywhere. We often hear complaints about 4th Street, for example. Obviously not part of our discussion tonight, but it comes up often. But to lower it below 25, Chad, is there even a possibility that happens on a state road? Below 25. Right now it's 25.
You can, but it's difficult.
What about when it's in school zone?
Yes, that is one of the reasons to reduce it below 25. Yeah, there's difference between there's statutory speed limits and then there's essentially like studied speed limits. So statutory is like, hey, I'm in an urban area, it meets these urban street contexts. You can just post a 35. It's a residential area. You could post a 25. But if they post outside of those statutory, those limits, you need like an engineering and traffic study to justify those conditions.
So what would the length around a school district, school building be? Would it be 1,000 feet, 1,500 feet? What's the threshold there?
Yeah, there's not a hard and fast distance. When I posted school zone speed limits, we take it out to a point where it just makes logical sense, like, hey, you're approaching a school area. And sometimes it even includes the side streets that are approaching it, depending on just how that school's configured. And so it is, but it's generally the abutting road to the school.
So hypothetically, could we make an argument 1,000 feet north and south of Lefevre Street? Which is a significant distance.
Right. No, you would probably maybe a block in each direction to get away with.
The blocks are actually pretty long.
Yeah. Yeah. The warrant for it, like the condition, the criteria you have to meet, one walking student.
Oh, we have that.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we got
I know,
that.
it's kind of incredible, but one walking student.
Oh, we have lots of walks.
Many more than that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of it.
Other thoughts? I know we might want to actually take a minute to talk about how the Welcome Center will integrate into this broader project. Do you want to take that?
So the Welcome Center is moving along. So for anybody that's trying to keep up with that, we'll be making some announcements on that soon. But so that's we're looking for that project to start happening this summer, and be ready for 2026. So so that's where that's going. One of the things that we're envisioning is having a space in front of that, which would be a larger sidewalk, kind of a plaza area with benches and heritage lighting and the things that you've been talking about. Again, to give that anchor building in literally the dead center of the historic district. So it's the halfway point between Lincoln Square and the end of Steinway Avenue. So it's really the perfect halfway spot to make it a walkable district, which was the goal from the very beginning. So we're almost there. And so how that sidewalk and all those amenities for ADA is going to play into that is really going to change this part of town in the center of Baltimore Street. I'm excited about how that's going to feed into pedestrian traffic, and certainly pedestrian safety becomes an issue as we have more people traversing that area, which is the goal for the enhanced sidewalks and all the things that we keep talking about that we're going to see and remembering that the other thing was important here, that was the stormwater, the things that you don't see unless it's pouring down rain and you're up to your knees in water. We don't want that. And then, and just so I don't forget to talk about that on the square, those same infrastructure issues are happening on the square. Major drainage issues. I mean, business owners will tell you those things, that the elevation is actually lower on the northwest corner of the square than it is on the southeast corner of the square. So you've got that drainage problem because everything's running one direction. So we have some, these are some great opportunities to really make a good investment in everything. So that's where the Welcome Center is now, and watch for more announcements soon.
I think we'll also probably need to talk about bus traffic on Baltimore Street. Obviously, we have the Shriver House Museum, which gets a lot of bus traffic. Where PennDOT would like to add a bus shelter for public transit on Baltimore Street. So we need to be strategic on how we manage that bus traffic. And so I think that's an extension of our ADA accessibility conversation. Right now, the initial plan is to put a bus shelter essentially right at the Welcome Center, so that you kind of have this hub and spoke parking concept, if you will. We have the parking lot, the very large parking lot in the middle school and elementary school right behind all of this, which makes sense then. Find a way to park in there when school's not in session, and then you can take public transit elsewhere if you need to. Other thoughts on Phase 1 before we turn it over to Peter?
Well, our group here at Table 1 talked a lot about this section needing to have a lot more light and much better sidewalks, for sure. It's commonly referred to as a dead zone. I know that's a horrible nickname to put for it, but that's the whole purpose of this specific phase, is to connect what's going on downtown with what's going on Steinway. And sometimes people think they're on Steinway and they think they are downtown. And same thing with the square. They think they're on the square and they're like, is this it? We want to get them going both to visit all of it, all of the shops and all of the restaurants and everything through there. But the safety and the lighting is very important. I think that's what Table 1 talked about a lot. I don't know about our other tables. Similar? Okay, Patty?
Yeah, Table 2, again, it was speed of traffic in that area. Actually, at Table 2, we have 3 people who are residents of Baltimore Street, so they spoke to that. And the sounds, I don't know that we can do anything about the motorcycle sounds in front of those streets, but coming down that street. But certainly kind of noise pollution. I think the feeling of that traffic signal would help slow that down as well, and increased lighting, certainly. But the residents that are here at Table 2 felt that things are going relatively well. You felt that the neighborhood was safe, that area is safe. And the big thrust, and you already talked about this, and has to do with the flooding and that culvert that goes by Mr. G's, and just the flooding. I mean, the water on some of those cars that are parked there are right up to the bottom of the doors. So that's an issue.
Thank you for circling back on that, because I know I asked the engineer, Chad Clabaugh, to address this when we're in this group discussion.
Yeah, and of course, you're speaking to my heart whenever you're talking about stormwater management, so, right? But it's a really exciting location where you have this underground culvert that's kind of failing, and I've been down in it to see it. It's quite something, but there is no stormwater drains from Lefevre Street south on Baltimore Street. So all of that water from all the way to the top of the hill, that hill we were talking about where traffic calming, all of that water comes down and there's no drains. So absolutely we need to do something better with the drains. PennDOT wants us to. PennDOT's welcoming us to do something better with the drains. Some of the ideas is to potentially get that culvert from underneath of those businesses. Reed's Winery's there, the Welcome Center, there's that sycamore tree at Mr. G's. One of the ideas is to run the storm drain that half a block south on Lefevre to Schoolhouse Alley, and then up Schoolhouse Alley and connect back into that underground system. So yes, we got to do that. We got to keep the same capacity, make sure all that water gets through. One of the things, if you ever go out there, there's the Farnsworth on the west side of the street, and there's that little little channel that goes through, that's another one of the tributaries that comes to this thing. So what we think back in the day was there was a 3-foot channel just like that was the original channel, and it flooded. So they added another 8-foot wide channel right next to it. So they essentially have this 2 3-foot wide and an 8-foot wide channel. So it's where all of the water funnels, and it's an absolute must to solve that problem when we do this project.
Any thoughts, Peter?
Hopefully I capture everything here that we were talking about, but I think definitely figuring out how to make the that intersection work. I mean, obviously the light has to deal with all 4 pieces, right, at the same time, and figuring out how to make it so that it's almost like a big square, if you will, where the sidewalks are allowed for people to be able to cross really well. It also gives you a little opportunity if you do neck down the road by a good chunk, then gives you an opportunity for more greenery, kind of like what I'm doing here, something very low that will make it much better and may help with some of the drainage too.
Excellent. So next week, we'll have a more finessed look at some concepts here, which will begin our conversations next week. I'm actually really liking how this is working out. I think this is great. All right, we're ready for the behemoth? Yes, essentially from the courthouse to the train station, obviously the middle focus point of that is the square, Lincoln Square. So while Peter is drawing, again, let's remind everyone of our top priorities for the square, and there were more than 3, really. We have revitalizing and regional collective parking was a priority listed. Other sidewalk ADA compliance, that's performer for all of them, and deliveries, bus and unloading areas. And if you combine the 2 categories of barricades and security with events, that is also a priority. So, while Peter's sketching some things, who wants to give thoughts? Here we go. Chad, can you hand that down? Chad. Yep.
Yeah, we talked, I think we were pretty unanimous, get rid of the parking. The back out parking, that's unsafe and doesn't add a lot, but maintaining access for bus unloading or deliveries, that was key.
Who's next? Pat.
I'm smiling because everyone here was pretty unanimous at this table to keep the parking. They didn't want to lose the parking. Just to have that balance there, But someone said that they thought they could do something a little different about the parking. There was enough room that could be, so they don't want to eliminate the parking. But they understand the safety issues. That's really important for them. And we all agree that people in the circle go pretty fast. They are not paying attention. Again, we're not sure what that speed limit thing, but people don't understand that people inside the circle have right of way first, right? The delivery trucks, it was suggested that maybe there could be restricted times where people could make deliveries. Like Mr. G's apparently gets deliveries at, did you say 3 a.m. sometimes?
Between 1 and 3.
1 and 3 a.m. So whether or not, and I know they do this in other cities too, they'll restrict the delivery times. That certainly creates a burden for the businesses. But everyone at the table universally loves the events on the square. Table 2 wants more events, right? Am I right on that? Okay. And pedestrian safety and the loading and unloading.
I will channel a prominent business person in town, Monica Oss, who, and I don't want to speak for her, but she and I have always had conversations about critical mass marketing. So she's in favor of these bigger things as well. I'm curious, though, because we have 2 competing tables, but yet we have, what's that? Yeah. Oh, okay. The couples, okay. It should be Thanksgiving conversation. Right. Oh, I'm getting there. Right, I'm getting there. Well, it might be a tie there, too, so we'll see. But because we have over a majority that categorized regionalized parking as a priority? Are we defining that? How are we defining that category? Because over half of the group says this is a priority. Well, the priority is keep parking for some of you, but not, So how do you define that? Like, how do you define regional parking? And tell me if you don't want to be put on spot that way, because it is kind of I don't know how to define it myself, so I'm curious.
I have a definition, I'm not sure it's the right way, but to me, it seems like you go to a place, you park, right? And then you walk. That we're more of a pedestrian-friendly city. We're 1 mile from one end of Gettysburg to the other. And I see us, so I don't know whether or not we would define regionalized parking as that people get out and park and then walk.
The only reason I thought parking was, why I thought parking was important was more for the businesses as opposed to, I was just curious as to what the businesses have to say about taking parking away.
That's going to be table.
We didn't answer your question.
It's going to be table 3.
And I will say something that I did hear at table 1, and that was, so that regionalized parking would be possibly an additional parking garage somewhere. So we could create those parking hubs and then create a walkable district or a shuttle opportunity or something that we could work with our businesses, that we can make sure that we can get people to and from where they need to be, so.
And visiting all of the places between.
In between,
that
correct.
parking lot or that parking lot.
And I'm still going to circle back here to two other prominent business owners on the square in a minute. But since this came up, I as the manager, I'm always in tune to parking in the borough because it's so vital to essentially the lifeblood, the economy of the borough. It's how we pay for the services we provide. It's about 22% of the borough's budget every year. So parking is a significant consideration in many facets. I recognize, and this is a great problem, by the way, but let me preface this, that it's a great problem, that we're becoming so busy, it's likely we're going to need another parking structure. That's a great problem to have. The reason I don't talk about it is, one, it's a lot of money to build a parking structure, and I wouldn't know quite yet how we fund that. We're not there yet. In general, we do not have a parking problem. I remember hearing at table 2 that sometimes the garage is full. That's correct, but it happens maybe 5 or 6 times a year. It's not regularly done every day. That will change in the next few years, particularly if the Gettysburg station is built, because people will be visiting those folks. Also, we have this train excursion coming, which will open up later this year. Their estimates now are tens of thousands of tickets sold annually. Those people have to park somewhere. So we're not at a parking crisis yet, but if we continue to be successful with our economic development initiatives, it's something we're going to have to talk about as a community. With that, let me pivot to table 3 and businesses, how you feel parking affects your businesses from an operational and a customer perspective, if you're comfortable talking that way. Dave? All right, you're on spot.
Yes to both of those. I'm open to really good ideas what to do. Unfortunately, our business, Blue and Gray, only has basement access on the square. So everything that comes into our business comes in on the square. Almost everything that goes out of the business goes on the square. We have removed trash from the square. We hand carry it now into the alley where I have a dumpster. But we have a lot of recycling. We have food deliveries Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. We have beer almost every day being delivered. So I need to figure that out. Parking is always an issue with all of our customers. Some of them really insist that they want to be close. I think that can change if we can get parking development on our side of the square, maybe the former JP building, which there was an idea a long time ago about that. But there are also like handicapped people that can't really travel that distance from parking garages. Safety on the issue, parking, I get the view of that, but statistically, are there accidents caused by backing out? Because it's so wide now, you can back out without entering in to the traffic flow. So visually, I see the safety, but I don't know the statistics do that. But I'm open to change. Who knows what business is going to look like 50 years in the future? I won't have to worry about that. But this is a big change for me to accept because this was not in the original development plan. My other thing on the square, it's a horrible place for large demonstrations to be because it's the most dangerous traffic intersection in the whole borough. People driving through circles don't know how to handle it, and now you have distractions on every corner. They're watching that, not watching the traffic. I'm just scared about the safety that something bad could happen. But we're open to change and look forward to some good ideas.
Timberly, want to talk about your perspective?
I agree with all of that. I also agree with getting rid of all of the parking on the square. For sure, I think it would have an impact on our businesses, 3 of which are on the square. So that, I think, though, can be dealt with through a lot of, communication, sharing of information with residents and visitors until we get that visible parking garage that people can see and understand where to park. So there will be some pain, but I think in the end it will definitely be worth it to have a beautiful, safe place where people can gather and appreciate, what we have here in Gettysburg in the square. So again, there will be pain, but I'm all for getting rid of all of the parking with the exception of handicap spaces because that we see every day. We need that accessibility. So in addition to accommodating the trucks and deliveries and all of that, but that's a must-have is the accessibility for those folks.
Can either of you or any of the other folks in the room address their thoughts on, so if parking were to be eliminated, we still have a desire and a need for deliveries, for functionality and operations, and also for loading and unloading large vehicles with large amounts of people. Does that belong right on Lincoln Square, somewhere mid-block, extending out of Lincoln Square? What are some thoughts on that?
I'll start.
I'm very, very well aware and appreciate all that Blue and Gray does for our community. And I'm not speaking for them or any other business on the square. But I do think that if we're talking about restaurant deliveries, for example, since that's the topic at the moment, we've got the hotel who has capability for deliveries behind the hotel. They actually have it all the time. The pub has their deliveries behind the pub. The Plowman's, I'm not sure how many deliveries they get, but I know that Blue and Gray gets a lot right there. Earlier in their conversation about buses not parking but unloading, loading and unloading, temporarily, you come in, you unload what you need to unload, or you load what you need to load, be it a person or a box. In my opinion, I think that would behoove the Blue and Gray to have that ability right there. But then it can be for everyone. If any business around in any quad needed a delivery, the delivery truck moves to right in front of Blue and Gray. They unload what they need and they roll it across to the hotel or to the Plowman's or to the pub or to Lark or wherever it happens where they don't have a back access. It's a very unique building that the Blue and Gray is in, and as you can see from that drawing, that tiny little alley there next to it, it's very, very difficult for them to get the things that they need to there. So I would like to see at least one of those quads specifically right in Blue and Gray, because I think that that's what's needed for that. Out of all of the businesses, I think that they need it the most. But that could be used for any of them. But I think that would put it right there if I, you know, a loading and unloading for deliveries. That's not to say that other things couldn't still happen around there, but there could be a way to park in and a ramp right up to them.
Would that be beneficial for Blue and Gray? I mean, obviously taking customer parking away is a concern of yours, but what about the delivery, that there's going to be, potentially going to be
So like my
dedicated loading and unloading?
Delivery was 184 cases of food that if they can't unload there, they would be hand trucking
Right.
somewhere down the
But
street.
So that would be beneficial to you then?
Yes.
Okay.
And that spot, sorry, I'm going to monopolize the microphone, as I usually do. That spot could literally be for unloading and loading for whatever. It could be for a bus to unload and you know, pedestrians that are coming to visit the square or anything on the square. It could be for a bus. They're unloading and they're going away to park elsewhere. The truck is coming. They're unloading their delivery for the restaurant as long as it takes, and then they've done their job and they've gone on. But having that spot, at least one right there at that specific quad, I think would be beneficial to all of the businesses to be able to utilize.
Thank you for that. Now, we are at 8:30, and I'm okay staying because I'm really enjoying the conversation. Just want to make sure everyone, if you need to go, totally understand. But I'm willing to keep going. If you're willing to keep going, I do have some other thoughts I'd like to ask the group. But before we pivot, any other thoughts on parking/deliveries as it relates to Lincoln Square? Any thoughts from Peter or PennDOT? Carl.
Yeah, so our group also talked about the Gettysburg Hotel in that quadrant, and maybe similarly to what Chad Allen was talking about with in front of the Blue and the Gray, maybe, you know, designated bus drop off and pick up there, but also not quite sure how to accommodate the guests that were arriving at the hotel. Yes, we know there's space in the alley behind that they could arrive, park, register, unload, but somebody coming to Gettysburg for the first time would know that. They see the hotel. So I think there needs to be some thought into how to accommodate, you know, the people arriving to check in and unload in front of the hotel potentially as well.
Good point. Okay, so I think this gives Peter some direction on some concepts to bring to us next week. As it relates to events, and we talked about, I understand Dave's perspective on the First Amendment issue. Just so everyone knows, obviously we cannot run afoul of the Constitution, and we need to allow everyone their constitutional right to express themselves. But the Supreme Court has ruled that municipalities can talk time, place, and manner for such First Amendment activity. The current Borough Council is making a decision that obviously when you are expressing that right, you're doing it in the most visible place so you can get your message out to the most people at any given time. So, and it's an absolute legitimate policy decision that the council is making. I only say that because in part of this conversation, when we're planning a future square to accommodate essentially more people and less vehicles, if this is the direction that the group wants to go. If we're creating spaces for more people, which personally I think is preferable because the square has always been, since our founding, the town gathering space, right? In fact, the courthouse used to sit right where the flagpole is back in the day. So, there's throwbacks to history when we're saying if we're going to gather as a community, this is the space that was built for it. So, with safety in mind, if we are going to build infrastructure that's going to make it easier to manage and accommodate larger events, whether that's First Amendment issues or Pride Fest or the Christmas Festival or whatever the event is, how do we build that infrastructure to accommodate more people as safely as possible to help mitigate costs for providing that security moving forward? And so I'm going to open this up for a general discussion on what was talked about at your tables. But also keep in mind that during COVID, we experimented with the parklet. And there were multiple parklets throughout town. One survived, and the reason that one survived is because it became popular. Now it has regular programming, especially in the warmer months. It's a very desirable place to be on a fall night or a summer night or a spring night. So, what are your thoughts as it relates to safety, events, and a larger gathering space?
Cars than we do. And they might not demand the kind of concept of parking so close to a building. They might be more comfortable walking or using other forms of transportation. So with that in mind, I do think maximizing the amount of people space was discussed here, and that it's even a traffic calming concept to have people occupying space. So I think the perspective of allowing the square to be peopled is a good one.
Other thoughts? What about a dedicated event space on the square? In other words, in some form, memorializing and making a more permanent something like the parklet that's actually built for events. It would be potentially hardwired for events, for sound, lighting, those types of things. What are the group's thoughts there?
I think it's a great idea. Great idea. I love that idea. I have 1,000 ideas, but I love that idea.
Please, expand.
Let me think it through, but I love that idea.
Yeah. And so what you're getting at is essentially different, we're saying a different use almost for each quad. So it sounds like it's shaping up to be, some handicap parking spaces somewhere, some delivery spaces, a nice event space, and then a hangout space, which seems really cool. It really does. And it seems like there's opportunity for, with all that space, you can bring in food, you can do all kinds of things for the larger scale events. And one thing we talked about at our table regarding Baltimore Street was parades and the concept of, can we have a designated parade route that kind of all parades follow? And so that those security measures that we have in place are the same thing and can just be doled out easier. When we were talking about the bollards that may be removable from the center of the street and what might be possible there.
Thank you for that. Other thoughts? Peter, you have any thoughts? I know we gave you a lot to kind of come back with next week.
Yeah, lots. I mean, I think so, just a couple of things to reiterate, which I kind of heard not so long ago. But number one, in terms of when it comes to parking, regional parking, just think about a mall. Think about any one of those big malls and the way they do it. And the magic, the way they do it is they put anchors at both ends and they make everybody walk from one end to the other. And the reason for that is because, if this is JCPenney and Sears, I think they're both dead. But anyway, if this is JCPenney and Sears, as people are going to JCPenney, they're going through all the tiny little shops and they end up buying, the impulse buying, the shoes that all of a sudden you don't need, but you want it because it's a red color, you end up buying it, So actually, and so one of the things that we have realized, what we have found in terms of doing a lot of parking counts and studies is that whenever you have a parking that is right in front of the store, that person's going to get off, go and shop, get back in the car and leave. So sometimes having the parking right in front of the shop is actually not the best for the whole entire community. It may help that shop. Having said that, if you have head-in parking, you may end up having 3 or 4 parking spots. But if you have parallel parking, you may end up having 1 or 2 spots that could potentially be for your store, but more than likely throughout the day, it's going to be shifting around all the time. So that's number one. Number two, and I think the cat is kind of out of the bag because there's a sketch that I did in the paper and the printouts, and it's this. And you can see it here. What I end up doing, and I'm not going to spill all the beans here, but I just very, very lightly drew the location where the cars are actually taking in trucks, and the traffic, where it goes, where it needs to go. And if you were to take the rest of that space, and this is what this line here is about, you end up getting all this area here that potentially could go back into being pedestrianized area zone. and that actually equates to 40% extra per quadrant that will go into pedestrian, into becoming whatever the world you want, So it opens up the possibility that each quadrant is going to have 40% more of space that could be used for a number of things.
That's a big number. A lot more outdoor dining, yeah, sure.
But also it could change. It could be outdoor dining. It could be, in some cases, it could be like a play area. In other places, could be like a band. In other places, it could be like people screaming about something or other. In London, we used to have the Poets' Corner, and that was people literally, they would bring a milk carton box, put it on the sidewalk, and just start reciting poetry. That kind of stuff, I know that's corny, but that kind of stuff, it could actually potentially happen as long as you give the space for it to actually occur and happen. So there's a lot. And obviously, there's other ideas and stuff that we'll probably talk about later, right?
Tonight?
Whenever you want.
Oh, okay. So the
30th.
It's 8:45. So we've been at this for a good amount of time tonight, and I think that you're all still here says you're really interested in the topic, and that's exciting. Like I said, the staff wasn't sure how to manage this tonight because this is our first time with this type of format. I think largely it was very successful. So I think that's where our conversation starts. So we take our thoughts tonight. I will send this spreadsheet I kept of all your priorities to the staff so they can incorporate that into the drawings. And then that's where we start next week is we put Peter on the hot seat and talk about his concepts that he's proposing for us. And if we veto them, then in real time, he can probably come up with plan B, C, D, or E. Sound like a plan for everybody?
Well, I have a suggestion for that.
Sure.
If you are able to, just a thought.
Because I love strategic planning sessions. So if you are able to return on the 30th, by all means, please do, because I think it will really help the conversation. If you're not able to, perhaps you can find a friend, a business partner, a colleague that is having a business, that also owns a business downtown, a resident that you know, in any of these phases. Send them, maybe even recap the convo so they can step into it with that already in mind, or just bring them along. The more the merrier.
Yeah, I like the direction we're headed. I think there's ideas that came out tonight that I didn't think of, and I know that internally we didn't. So we'll see where that goes. But just so everyone also understands, there is a timeline to this. So the design concepts that come out of tonight's meeting and next week's meeting will be synthesized down, and it will appear on Borough Council's May workshop. So that way the council then can see what collectively came out of these meetings. Then council will take more input during their public comment periods. But ultimately, by the end of the summer, at the latest, you have a specific date in mind, Chad? But late summer, fair? By late summer, our design professionals are going to need a direction from the Borough Council so that they can actually begin the 2-year process of getting into the weeds on our design concepts. So that's our timeline. So by the end of the summer, as a community, we want to know our vision for Baltimore Street from south to north. So that's where we're headed. And thank you for participating tonight. I think this was great. I think you all succeeded in thinking beyond yourselves, and we're talking 50, 75 years in the future, which is great. That's the whole point to this project. So thank you. Hope to see you next week.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you.